Hello everyone, it's Mark Holthe, Canadian immigration lawyer, back again with another live Q&A. And as always, on Thursdays, this isn't the Mark show, it is the Alicia show. How are you doing, Alicia?
I'm well. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing really good. So I am running on about, I'd say about 4 hours sleep last night. Don't ask me why. Apparently there's other things going on in my life in addition to Holthe Immigration Law and the Canadian Immigration Institute and all the fine work that we're doing here for the folks that tune in. It's great to have you guys. I know a lot of people are getting accustomed to the fact that, hey, there's a live Q&A on Thursdays now. And so I'm really, really happy to bring Alicia on. I know you guys are tired often of hearing from me all the time blithering away. And so so it's great to have you here. I don't know, what's new with you? Anything new, Alicia? What are you working on? Anything interesting?
We're working on a bunch of spousals right now and some LMIAs for corporations, and yeah, there's some work that's getting done. I've got a few intercountry adoptions that we're looking at as well, which are always tough. But yeah, there's just, people have questions, ongoing questions about applications that they filed, their study permits that they're trying to apply for still, and it's getting pretty close for that deadline for winter intake unless you're under SDS. So people are starting to look out at the spring intake now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Kartik says he finally, after 1 month of waiting, he'll get his passport back. He got a passport back from IRCC, coming to Canada next month. And I know who to contact for anything related to work permit or citizenship, the great Mark. I will add, Kartik, that it's also the great Alicia and the great Susan and the great Chanel too. And yeah, it's great to have you connecting. Make sure you post in, guys, where you're tuning in from. Thursdays, we have a little bit smaller group just because so those who come are definitely going to have a greater shot at getting your questions answered on Thursday because it's just starting to get recognized by people. I think many people basically are kind of arranging their affairs because they know that the live Q&As are going to be on Wednesday. So it's kind of fun to do this and make sure that we really are able to hit on the people that are asking questions. So we've got Jacob who's over in Charlotte. Make sure you post everywhere, everyone, what you're where you're from and where you're tuning in from. Igor says, "Yeah, good to see Alicia's first live." Well, the reality is, Alicia, this is Igor. We're a couple. So he's going to school now, so he's kind of bouncing in here and there with us and helping with some of our back office stuff. But this is probably, well, technically maybe our third one that we've done. I can't remember,
I think so.
But we'll get everybody acclimatized. Okay, let's see here. Ahmed says, I'm scared. My friend told me it's not really about immigrating to Canada. I have no clue. I don't know what that is. Maybe he's wondering what the purpose of the Q&A is. I don't know. We've got an animal lover from Algeria. That's great. Waiting for their passport request. Zakari is over in Nairobi, Kenya. We love our African connection. It's great to have you connecting in. Monsoon says, from your law school city, guess it. Well, you're definitely in Winnipeg then, because that's where I went to law school. So good to see you, Monsoon. Jennifer, she's watching on the Canadian Immigration Institute Facebook page. We welcome to you. And I'm still looking to see if anyone actually sees these on the LinkedIn page now, Alicia, because we're broadcasting to all three: Twitter, LinkedIn, well, Facebook and YouTube all at once. So I don't think those that are watching on LinkedIn have the ability to have their questions posted here. I'm not sure. While you're answering questions, I might fiddle around in the background and see if we can find anything. All right, we've got Mohammed who's over from Pakistan. Great to see you. And let's see who else we've got that we can give some shouts out to. Aisha says, "Hey, Mark and Alicia, lovely to have you both. Love these videos." That is awesome. Thank you for that very, very positive comment. And Chaitanya, still waiting for the ECOPER. You bet. Oh, you got your PR credentials. Chaitanya. Chaitanya we've been working with him for a while, and finally he's got his PR credentials, and he's waiting now for the ECOPER, but it took a long time. And Chaitanya, I want you to comment. How long have you been waiting? Because this is something that people are seeing. The portals are a disaster. Everything within the online filing process is a disaster. Trying to communicate with immigration is a disaster. I had, like I said, this week has been chock full of meetings. I had a meeting yesterday with ESDC, which is the foreign workers. Tomorrow, I think Thursday, Friday, yes, I have a meeting with the border officers, CBSA. And so, yeah, there's problems all over the map. So Chaitanya, make sure you comment below as to how long you were waiting. So basically, Chaitanya sent his email to get his portal set up so that he could provide his PR credentials, and he waited and he waited and he waited. So those of you who are also waiting, sometimes it's comforting to know that that's just a problem with the portal and not necessarily anything you're doing wrong. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, this is a good one. I'm going to pull this one up and we're going to answer this one. Alicia, I don't know if you've had this experience, but when you're an express entry and they ask for you to upload a police certificate, for instance, it has this weird defaulted fields in there. And one of them is an expiry date. Well, I can tell you, YouTube vids, that it doesn't matter. Put 6 months if you want. Like if there's not something already listed on the work permit, it really doesn't make a difference, but just fill in something in that box. It's not something that immigration really gets too hung up over. Any other thoughts on that, Alicia?
Yeah, if there's no expiry date, then pick an arbitrary date. And normally what I do is I tell clients, write it in your letter of explanation. Just say, look, there's no expiry date on this document. I had to put something in order for the field to validate or for me to be able to submit the application, but I want to be very truthful and there is no expiry date. So I picked an
Yeah.
arbitrary one and that's why it's in there.
Yeah, and you have to, otherwise it won't allow you to actually upload. And remember, you guys, when you are uploading any documents that come through a request from immigration, that it's not enough to just upload it into the document checklist section. You actually have to go back in and resubmit your EAPR again. So that second stage, I've had a client who got their application refused because they didn't do that. Okay, we've got representation from Halifax. We've got Murray from the south of England. We've also got Bernard who's over in the UK. That's fantastic. Rasmin asked the question that we get more than any others. When will IRCC start doing outlands? I'm going to say this spring, you guys. Dara from India, good to see you. And then we have Jovi, who Jovi and I have got the connection here because her last name, every time I look at it, reminds me of my hometown, Carmingay. And so one video, Alicia, we actually went back and I showed them where I had to show them the link to the Village of Carmingay website. So good to see you watching from Burnaby. I know you guys are pretty wet out there, and we're hoping that this horrible flooding can be resolved. Okay, let's keep zipping through here. So Sashin says, does my work experience count after my work permit expires, but I've already filed for my PR and there is no decision made yet? Alicia, I'm assuming this is like an express entry. We'll approach it from that standpoint. Do they care? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so it all depends on whether you've actually filed for an extension or some other sort of bridging work permit in the meantime, or if you had filed for an extension before your current work permit had expired. So, do be really careful about this. So yes, you can count your work experience, and as long as you're validly able to be employed, and there's some circumstances where you can be employed without a work permit when you've got maintained or implied status. And so it depends on whether you've submitted another application to extend or change conditions on your work permit. Depending on what your underlying reason for qualifying for that work permit was, keep in mind you can't extend a post-grad work permit. So hopefully you've either got your application submitted and you can do that bridging open work permit, or if you hadn't been able to extend that afterwards, you would have had to do that extension application in the meantime, kind of that in-between bridging time that you still didn't get the PR submitted and you didn't have that to be able to do the bridging open work permit. You would have had to put in an extension application, maybe under an LMIA if you had an employer that had an LMIA, or there might be some other specialized circumstances for you.
Absolutely. And it's interesting too, Sashin. So another thing to take into consideration is that after you've filed your permanent resident application, other than making sure you've maintained status, there's no extra points or benefit other than if your work experience is part of a job offer and it's under the federal skilled worker program where you have to maintain employment. So that's one factor to consider after after you filed your PR application. Then that initial assessment for eligibility and any work experience, if it's say express entry, all of that it's locked in. And so anything that happens after doesn't really contribute to your PR application other than the need to maintain status. Okay. Irakli is from, I'm going to make that be silent. We'll say Salezi, Georgia.
Igor would know.
That is a first. That's a first. Cardic, love from India. Well, love from Canada right back at you. Joe says, hey, Mark and Alicia, hope both of you are doing good from India. That's great. Oh, Jama. Yes, been waiting since 2019. Many people are in that situation. Okay, here's a question from Gina. She says, can I apply for my spouse bridging open work permit? We're both inland. He is included on my express entry BC PNP application, no restriction, AOR March 18th, 2021. So can I apply for my spouse's bridging open work permit? And I know she's asking, she's probably not wording it properly, Alicia, but what do you think about that one?
So yeah, if you filed your express entry, you've got your BC PNP application that was not employer restricted, and you already have that AOR from March 18th, as long as you can prove that you are working in a high skilled occupation, so knock A, B, or O for over 6 months, then you can apply for your spouse's open work permit as well. So, take a look at your supporting evidence to show that you do have a job that qualifies as a high-skilled job, even if there's no restriction on the BC PNP nomination.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. I love these comments. Mohammed says, it's almost midnight here in India, and a little crying. He's look at the tear on that little emoji. Please try to start the live stream sooner if possible. Thanks for everything you guys do. Really appreciate. Mohammed, yesterday's started at 10, which was a little bit earlier, and we're trying to accommodate for people all over the world. So one of the challenges that we do have is finding that sweet spot where we're trying to reach everybody. And, right now we've kind of settled on this time because Alicia and I also have families and obligations outside of work. And, we do this for two purposes. One is just to be good people and to help and assist. Some people offer free consultations. We don't do that in our firm. We offer free live Q&As. And we do that because it gives us the ability to leverage our precious time and to share it with as many people. And so as many people as possible can benefit. And, but when the day ends, both Alicia and I, family is super important to us. And so we have to keep it within the confines of our busy work schedules. And that's why we've really chosen the times that we do. And in fairness, even with the express entry course, which I think a lot of you have seen, and in the link below, I think we should have the link to the upcoming course. I'll just flip over here, Alicia, and we'll just show people. Within this course that we have that's launching December the 6th, you can totally go in, purchase it now, but the master class is scheduled from 5 to 6 Mountain Time in the evenings. And right now, with the lack of outland, no program specified draws, it makes sense to have it at that time because a lot of the clients are in Canada. We've seen repeated PNPs. We saw one yesterday. I did a news update just last night, just talking about the new PC, the most recent draw that was PNP only. And so this is a question that lots of people ask, and it's always hard for us. We know we can't hit everybody, but hopefully you can work with us and still stay up. And even though it's late there, so thanks for being here. Okay, Abiljit is waiting for a work permit decision from India. Yes, and we've looked at those processing times. Let's take a peek, Alicia, and we'll show them what we've got going on here. Let's see if I can pull this up. Let's go over here, and anybody can look this up, you guys. IRCC processing times. That's all you need to do. And then let's see what work permits are in India. And in the meetings that I've had with immigration, I can tell you that there are certain work permits that are priorities and others that are not. So if we go work permit from outside Canada, and then we just choose here, flip down to India, and then we get processing time, you can see it is a massive, massive period of time. And so you can see this was last updated just 2 days ago. And at least they're being transparent, Alicia. At least they're being honest, because people can then try to govern themselves accordingly. There we go. All right. Let's see here. We'll say hello to Saranji. And okay, Simpsons. I love that. It's like you should add the in front of it, the Simpsons. I've submitted my PR application last month, but left a gap in my personal history section. Should I fill the background declaration form through a web form? So we don't know what program, if it was, you know, it could have been TR to PR, it could have been Express Entry, we're not sure. But what are your thoughts on that, Alicia?
Well, I mean, you can try, but the problem is often, especially if it's Express Entry, if there's any serious gaps or any mistake that the officer thinks you've made in that application, or it's an incomplete application, unfortunately, it's, you know, they don't have a lot of mercy. They tend to simply refuse and say reapply. If it is a spousal application, if you did a spousal sponsorship or were being sponsored by a spouse, then maybe you can maybe do a web form inquiry. I mean, you can try anyways. You can try doing that web form inquiry and say, oh my goodness, I just realized that there's a gap in my personal history. Do a letter of explanation, put that page on the form to correct it, sign it, upload it. But it's hard. It's hard when you've got something that's missing and there's a gap in there, because it could be returned.
Yeah. And we'll also direct you back, Simpsons, here to this video that we did right before Halloween on misrep. We talked about some of the scary aspects of misrepresentation, but we also in that video talked about, and you know, in the beginning we went over a bunch, and it's a longer video just because the back end was a lot of Q&A. But in the beginning of that video, we go through a lot of different things, and we even talk about how you deal with potential issues. So go check that out, watch that video, and there is more information in there that can kind of help you to address. And as always, you guys, you know that, and I repeat this frequently because we believe in this. You have the ability always to go connect with our firm, click on speak to a lawyer at any time. And trust me, in that 25-minute consultation that you have with Alicia or one of our other lawyers, we can help you to navigate through this. And it's far better to ask those questions in advance before you file your application than coming back. And ironically, Alicia, people usually, it's after the fact when they call us, right? And,
yeah. And this is the big thing, is that sometimes it's not just a gap in your personal history. Sometimes you realize that you didn't account for things properly, or there's overlapping periods of time, or, you know, you thought that your history was one way and that's the way you've done it on all your previous applications, but now you realize you have to make a correction. And if that's the case, then it's not just a matter of, oh, there's, you know, I missed a line. It's maybe they're going to say I misrepresented because there's differences, there's discrepancies between my earlier applications and this one, and that needs to be explained and fully discussed.
all right. So Saranji is from Sri Lanka. Excellent. All right, let's get back to George. And George is one of the, in his cohort of the Express Entry step-by-step masterclass, George is the last one waiting to get his permanent residence. And so George, this is the situation that so many people are facing, George. He says, zero communication from IRCC. They do reply to web forms saying, we have reviewed your app and it is in process, but they don't say how. So if GCMS notes say final approved, it's super, super frustrating. And I understand, George, and let's go right to Chaitanya. I asked him to tell us what his actual situation was. And Chaitanya, this is what he responded. It took him 15 days just to get the notification back to log in to the PR landing portal. He said 1 hour, 23-minute phone call, 4 emails, and 2 web forms just to get my PR credentials. So that's just to upload his the information to get his eCoper. And so this is the world that we're in, you guys. I just got off a call. I have a monthly meeting. We call it our click meeting with various friends across the country, immigration lawyers, where we get together and just share our experiences and our thoughts and our ideas. And it's interesting, this whole COVID pandemic and the corresponding impact on immigration is affecting not just Canada, obviously, but other countries. The US is heavily paper, based as well. And their process, one of my colleagues had to send someone down to the US, and they needed a B1 visa, a visitor visa, essentially to a business visitor visa to attend a conference. And the interview times for scheduling the interview to actually go in, she said in many places you can't book an appointment until 2023. So you can imagine, right now how frustrated we all are here in Canada, but at least we're hybridized. So we have some applications that have been filed online, and on the temporary side, even though PR is quite painful, and we do not minimize in any way what you guys are going through, wow, things are a whole lot worse in many, many other countries.
And it is interesting too, part of the Canadian Bar Association. So I was listening in, I think Mark, you were on that as well. But we had one of the CBSA officers at the Calgary International Airport, and he was saying, because of all these backlogs now, he's got a set amount of time where he can review, hundreds of applications. But then what happens is people start calling, and then they start emailing, and they start doing web forms, and then he's got to respond to all those as well. And then there's less time to process the applications. So it's also a double-edged sword, right? If there's so much of a backlog that people then are asking about their applications, which is, understandable, but it does actually take officers time then to go and respond to all the web form inquiries. So he was trying to say, try not to keep doing so many web form inquiries just to ask on the status of your file. It's different if there's been a material change in the application, or if there's new information, or if you need to upload something, or if their system isn't working.
Yeah, and that's, immigration has told us that since the beginning of time. And it's so frustrating because when there is no meaningful method of communication where you can actually expect a response in a reasonable period of time, people are rightly so concerned and anxious and wondering what the future holds, hoping that, maybe it wasn't just lost, their inquiry. And then immigration can be pretty ruthless if they feel you haven't responded. So this is a situation that IRCC has created themselves, and they're going to have to find a way out of it. And, as things open up, the volume of applications that are piling in now, Alicia, is only going to make it worse. And I'm really, really curious as to see how they're going to navigate their way through this. And you can see there's a lot of movement within immigration. I have to be careful what I say. There's a lot of movement within immigration. It's a very high stress. Alicia and I, we're locked in. This is what we do. And, come thick or thin, good or bad, we will proceed forward with doing this. I don't know, Alicia, if I would have chosen to be an immigration lawyer if I knew how challenging it was going to be. I got into it for a reason. And, I love being an immigration lawyer for all those reasons, but interacting with the department has been really, really painful over the last 2 years, and even a little bit before then. So, but for people that are working on the government side, they can move departments. And that's what we're seeing a lot of, is burnout, and then moving to a different department outside of immigration to another government department. And then there's always a steady flow of new people coming in who are having to learn the ropes. And whenever you have someone new, you look at even Chanel, who's experienced and a great immigration lawyer. She's figuring out our system. So she jumps on the calls with me and just to understand kind of the rules of engagement, how the systems work, let alone actually providing legal advice to clients during the consults. But for the government officers, it's the same way, learning the ropes. We've got a new minister now who has to learn the ropes. And so it's not easy for anyone. All right, Alicia, you do more study permit stuff than I do. So it's a pretty open-ended question. So I think you can probably give a pretty open-ended answer too.
Well, I mean, the answer is it's going to depend on a number of factors. And so I get a lot of people asking me about what are the chances on a study permit. And there are some things that immigration officers look at. And so one of them is okay, it's your age, but it's not only your age, it's your age in relation to your education and your career history and your plan. And so it really depends, right? You could be 33 years old and you could have finished your first degree, you could have gone on to do some work experience and then a master's degree, and maybe you're looking at doing some sort of, post certificate program, and that might fit with your career trajectory. They also look at the time gap between when you last did your studies and when you're looking to do another study permit. And that needs to make sense. They will also look at your marks. So if you did really poorly in your last degree or high school or whatever it was that you did as post-secondary, that's something that also makes it tougher. There's other factors too, but certainly looking at the whole history, like your life circumstances, and being able to explain why. Why do you want a study permit at this time?
Yeah. And that's a perfect segue to Dara. If you're looking at doing that process, the very, very first application you make is going to give you the best chance of success. If you get one refused, then the chance of getting a second one refused is that much higher. And so it always makes sense. And I will say this, as we say here in Southern Alberta, till the cows come home, I will say this. It's far better for you guys to book that 25-minute consultation right at the front end so that we can give you direction and advice, let you know realistically what your chances are, rather than booking the consult after you've already had it refused. And so just a plug, head over there. The link is always in the description for our videos here. All right, next question is Pranita. Says, I've got my e-Coper back in the 6th of October, but no update on PR card application whatsoever. All right, well, let's be realistic here, Pranita. Let's shift over and let's take a look at the screen here. I pulled this up while Alicia was talking. 63 days. Okay, that's what the stated processing time is for first application. So in your situation, my friend, you are well within those processing times, and so you're going to need to just hang tight and just see how it plays out. Okay, and then Rosman, yes, December 2020. We'll cross our fingers every day. Okay, Danielle says, I'm practicing RCIC from Mississauga, Ontario. Your videos are absolutely helpful for immigration-related matters. I learned a lot from your videos plus experience. Stay safe, Mark. Thank you so much, Danielle. I really, really appreciate that. And you know, Danielle, I have a lot of people that actually come and join the Express Entry course. And a lot of consultants come and take that course. And anything I can do to raise the bar generally within our profession. And you can see here, I think if I look at the referrals here, Diane here, she's an immigration consultant. And I'm trying to remember who else. Shelly is an immigration consultant, I believe. And so there's a number of consultants that have come in and joined me. And like I said, the next one is going to be launching December the 6th. And one thing that I'm working on is to try to get the professional education credentialing from the regulator for consultants. And we now have a new college, right? That was just, it was just changed. I don't know if they still call you RCIC, Danielle. I'm not sure. But just a couple of days ago, there's a new college, a governing body for the immigration consultants. And I sure hope, Daniel, that organization is going to be able to clean up a lot of the problems that exist within the ranks of immigration consultants, where you've got good people like you who are trying to do things properly and learn, where you are not having your reputation sullied, I guess, by crooked consultants and ones that should never have been granted the ability to practice any form of immigration representation. So good to see you. All right, let's see who else we've got here. I'm just going to shift my screen around. Looks like I'm going to move this over back just a little bit so it's not off the screen. Okay, here's another, it looks like another study permit. So this is Eduarda. She says, when applying for a study permit through SDS, should I make a GIC investment for all my family funds or only the 10K and show the rest on our accounts? Thank you so much. So this is an interesting one, Alicia. Do you want to tackle this one? I think there's probably multiple ways of tackling this, but what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So for those of you who are wondering what SDS is, it's the Student Direct stream, and there's only certain countries that you're eligible to apply for Student Direct. You've got faster processing times. It's a more streamlined process. So one of the program eligibility parameters of SDS is that you have to have a $10,000 GIC, a minimum of a $10,000 Canadian equivalent once you've looked at your exchange rate from whichever country you're from. And if you don't have that, you don't meet the program eligibility requirements for SDS. But you still also do need to prove that you've paid the full first year of tuition. And be careful with this because I've had students come back to me and say, well, my university or my college said it's okay if I only pay the
Yeah.
first semester's tuition. And that might be fine with your university or college, but it's not fine with immigration for the purposes of SDS. You have to show that full 1 year tuition. And sometimes normally what the universities will do is they will keep your money kind of like in a trust account. They will keep it on your account to be applied to the next semester's tuition for that year. Be really careful when you're talking to the universities and the colleges. Talk directly with their admissions people. Don't go through third parties. Don't go through somebody who says, I'm going to deal with this all for you. You want to be speaking directly. They all have people who know that they've got international students. They can all have somebody from that school talk to you for free. It's all part of what they do, to talk about exactly, how do you deposit those funds? How do you make sure that you can prove that first 1 year of tuition? In terms of how much more money do you need to show, then that's going to depend on what your living expenses are and the number of members of your family. So it depends on how many people you're looking to try to bring with you as part of that application.
Mhm. Excellent. Okay, this one is from a random girl. She says, for TR to PR, will I need to submit a new police clearance certificate if the one I have for my country is more than 6 months old? I haven't left Canada since receiving that police certificate. That's a pretty short answer. What do you think, Alicia?
So there is some guidance on this specifically for express entry in the context of express entry. And I don't think they've actually put anything to change the program guidelines on the TR to PR, but we have been looking at the express entry program guidelines on that. And they do give specific advice. So they say, as long as you've not left the country, as long as you've remained in Canada and you had that police certificate that was, yeah, here we go. So this is where you can look at the answer in terms of the context of express entry, which we assume is going to apply for TR to PR.
Just going to pull it up here. Yes, and
Yeah.
it's right here. I love this. I really like when the government produced this because it really, really helps. And yeah, you can see here.
Mm-hmm.
Right
So
there.
there you go. For countries in which the applicant no longer resides, so if it's somewhere outside of Canada, the police certificate had to have been issued after the last time they stayed in that country for 6 months or more in a row. So as long as you left that country, you got the police certificate and it was issued after the day that you left the country, you can
Yeah.
still use it. Police certificates meeting the above requirements can still be accepted even if that expiry date on the police certificate has elapsed. That said, immigration can always come back and say, give us
Yeah.
an updated police certificate. But if they haven't, then as long as that police certificate was issued after you left the country and you've remained in Canada since, unless they ask for more, you should be okay on that.
Yeah. And just like Alicia said, the officer always has the discretion to be able to come back and request. But even if the police certificate itself has an expiry date listed on it, that's irrelevant for immigration purposes. So great.
Yeah. Do be
Okay.
careful though, right? Like if
Yeah.
anything's changed, if you've had an arrest or if you've been
Yeah.
handcuffed or detained or you've sat in a police car, you have a positive obligation to change and update the circumstances of your files. So,
Yeah. Okay. Grace has this question. My birth certificate is in Spanish. Does it need to be translated to apply for CEC? If so, should the translation be done by someone in Canada? How can I find a certified translator? I can jump in on this one if you want, Alicia. For express entry through the Canadian Experience class, they don't, if you're the principal applicant or even a spouse, they don't ask for your birth certificate. So it's not a required document. Other applications like spousal sponsorships and things like that, if you're the principal applicant, they do. But for purely if you're asking about CEC, then the birth certificate is not one of the documents that they require upfront. Now, they can always come back and ask for anything, but at this stage, it's not it's not something that you need to concern yourself with unless IRCC at a later date specifically asks for that. Okay. Okay, this is an interesting question. Maybe you can throw your thoughts in, Alicia. So Jacob says, please, I want to find out when the right time is to submit my profile. That's a big open-ended. What do you think?
So I would say submit your profile. If you're eligible to submit your profile, if you have your education credential assessment and your language test results and both of those are valid, submit it. There's absolutely no harm in doing it. And, back in the past, maybe that answer would have been different, but then they did the TR to PR pathway. And if you didn't have a profile, you missed out. And so, maybe they're not going to be doing draws for another 3, 4, 5 months. We don't know. But if they were to do a draw, you wouldn't want to miss out. And so, yes, you might have to go get updated police certificates or updated, later on if they do actually select you. But if you have that education credential assessment and you've got your language test and they're both still valid, there's no harm in doing it now. And you do have an obligation. The only thing is that once you have it up there, if your circumstances have changed, you do need to update your profile because you wouldn't want to leave it in there, change your job, have things really different in your not code or something, get an ITA that you now can't use because you forgot to update your profile. That's really the only risk. So just remember to update it if things change.
Right. And as Alicia indicated, she made reference to the TR to PR pathway. I know what you meant. She meant the big draw, the 176 draw that scooped through. Yeah, I totally know what you meant. Trust me, I had an allegation of a lawsuit against me for not being careful as to what I said. So about some certain Quebec schools. So we're not going to go there. But anyways, what Alicia was referring to, that draw 176 back in February the 13th of this year, 2021. No one would have dreamed of submitting a profile, or at least us charging someone to submit a profile where the person had a CRS score of 75. Like there's no way. We would have considered it negligent, and not only negligent, but a really abusive practice and exploitation to take money from someone we knew didn't have a chance. And for the last 4 or 5 years, no one would have ever been drawn with that low of a score. And then it happened. So it's caused all of us to think twice about what we're doing. And you have provinces like Alberta, Alicia, where they do draw people with scores as low as 300. And they look at their occupations. And if they're in a position, that is potentially an area of shortage in Alberta, then they will reach into people that have a profile that have scores as low as 300 to invite them. And so other provinces tend to be that way a little bit as well. So we'll see. So yeah, you have to, when you're filing it, there's no harm. And that's why I keep pointing back, and I keep pointing back, and people are like, oh, all Mark does is plug his course. You're bloody right. I do, because for what you pay for this course, you can not only learn what you need to do to file your application, but I'll go into my library here as if it was mine. And this is the last course that we did in September. But when you look at this, and it has everything from the basics to eligibility module 2, and these 2 modules alone will help you to know if you really have a shot at this, if you really have an opportunity, and whether or not it's worth pursuing. There are other factors you have to take into consideration. Have you been previously deported from Canada? Do you have medical or criminal inadmissibilities that could make the whole process moot? So because of that, this is why I encourage people to come take the course, even now, before those draws start coming, so that if there are things that you need to change or modifications you need to make in your own circumstances to make you more competitive, that course and the masterclass that I have will set you up so that you're not reacting, but instead you're proactive. All right.
And the other thing, so for sure, Mark, thank you for catching that, because mea culpa, that was my mistake. I did not mean the TR to PR. I meant the big draw that they did back in February. Yeah. But the other thing is, Jacob, I'm assuming that you were in Canada, but you might not be in Canada. And so this is another thing that comes up is some people are worried if they create their express entry profile and then they're doing, let's say, a study permit
Yes.
application at the same time, well, then things change. So if you're not actually in Canada and you're trying to do a permanent residence application, like your express entry profile to be in the pool, but you're also trying to come as a visitor or you're trying to come as a student or you're trying to come on a work permit, then there might be other things to consider because immigration always is looking at whether you have a temporary intent if you are also doing a temporary application. Yes, you can have a dual intent. You can have that express entry profile sitting there and you can try to be applying for your study permit, but you have a little bit of a bigger bar now. You've got to prove that you are likely to go back to your home country at the end of your studies. And if you have that express entry profile sitting in there, then you're going to have to prove stronger ties or some sort of really solid connection back to your home country. So there are a lot of nuances to, a big, broad question like that. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of a question, we could spend a whole hour talking about all the factors that we look at. All right. So Kartik has a question here about ports of entry. So he says, any tip on what they can ask at the port of entry for a study permit approved candidate? Anything people forget to carry to show at the port of entry that could, maybe cause some problems? Any thoughts on that? Well, it looks like Kartik, when I look at your little image there, oh, that's hilarious. We got to look at this. Well, look at this. How ironic here. Okay. Look at the size of that bag. My goodness, my friend. Oh, let me see if I can just jump it back just a little bit. It's so funny. Oh, there. Okay. Look at the size of that bag. So I know, my friend, if that's the bag that you're actually bringing to Canada, well, I can tell you that there probably isn't going to be anything that you've left out.
They might worry that you're bringing too much. You've got to declare, your financial instruments. And, if you're moving here permanently, they might get concerned about the fact that you're importing things without authorization. Um, so, yeah, okay. So here's the thing, and this is one of the points that the CBSA officer made yesterday too, is that even though you've got that approval letter from the overseas post or from whichever application center you've applied through, the officer at the port of entry always has the final say. It is always up to them. They always have discretion to ask you about your application. And if what you say doesn't make any sense, if you're not prepared, if you don't understand the program that you're applying to or why or how, then you could run into real problems. So they always say for sure, print a copy of the application that you've submitted. So, make sure that if you didn't submit this application 100% on your own, then you've got full access to it. You've printed it off. You've got a paper copy that you can bring with you because sometimes, you can't find it or you're scrolling through hundreds of pages on your phone. So make sure to bring that paper application. Make sure that you understand everything that's in your application and you
Yes.
can speak to it because that's the big thing.
Yeah. Especially when you're relying on a representative to help you. And this works the same, whether it's a study permit, a work permit, whatever the entry is. If someone else has prepared your package for you or filed your application for you, and you present yourself before the officer, they're going to expect that you know what was actually presented or is in the information that resulted in you getting that pre-approval. So educate yourself, and that's a big part of what we do in the firm. We're not the kind of firm that just says, here's a questionnaire, here's the document checklist, fill it out, give it back. We'll submit the application. Don't talk to us. We'll take care of it. Don't worry about anything. That's not us. We place huge emphasis on educating our clients so that they know what we know. And together, when we're both working together, that's when we can make sure that we're putting together an application that has a really good chance of getting approved. So here's a great response. I've got to turn this on. I'm going to give her applause to start with here. So Aisha says, even though my questions are not answered, okay, hopefully I've got to some of your questions, Aisha, but the live question answers are great. Wow, very informative. So this is what we hope. And part of the reason we take a little bit more time to answer questions, we could have just zipped off and said, yes, no, yes, no. But we take time to give context and to provide answers and information that are more comprehensive, is because we know even though one person asks a question, it may very well benefit many other people who are watching. And those of you who are able to stick around and watch, and we're up over 100 now, which is really good for a Thursday. You guys that are sticking around and you're watching and reading the questions and hearing our answers, you are getting the benefit of someone else who may have a question that you never even thought of, but fits exactly with your situation. And I'll be honest, Alicia, that's part of the reason why I created the course here, because part of the course is this masterclass where every evening, 5 to 6 p.m. Mountain Time right now, starting on the 6th, that's when the next course starts. But the reason I like that program so much is because in that masterclass, when people are asking questions, everybody benefits from it. And they have the things that they had not even considered asking. Well, and everybody's kind of in the same mode. Everybody's right in the same stage, getting ready to, either submit their application, or some people already have an ITA. So there's a lot of questions that overlap, and that's really where the icing on this amazing chocolate cake is. It's that masterclass. So link below, definitely go down there. If you're thinking about express entry, no matter what stage you're at, we've got something for you in that masterclass. All right, let's see what else we've got here. Okay, so Dan. So Dan's in Sydney, Nova Scotia. He applied for 2 TR to PR programs. That's fine. There's no restriction on that. The grad stream and essential I think non-healthcare 2 weeks later. How does IRCC choose which app to process first? First come, first serve. I've never heard any indication that they're treating international grad applications different than they're treating the essential workers. So I haven't heard that they're triaging. Maybe somebody else knows something I don't. But at this stage, it really appears to be first come, first serve. So because of how many applications flooded in, Dan, I expect that your international grad application is going to be way, way further along than your essential worker by the time they get to it, because in that 2-week period, there was probably 60,000 applications, maybe more, that were submitted, maybe even 70. All right. Okay, let's see. This one's from Mohammed. He says, Ontario has reached its max nominations for this year. Does it mean they won't give any nominations for this year, only start nominations from next year, January? This is a great, great question. And each province is a little bit different. I am more familiar with Alberta than I am the intricacies of the Ontario program, but they always work on fiscal year. And so it's more the nominations that they extend than it is people being able to apply. So, unless the programs are closed, people are still eligible to submit applications. If there's a notification of interest that goes out to you in your profile, you have the ability to continue to submit that, because they always need intake coming in to fill the quota for the next province, the next fiscal year. In Alberta, the fiscal year is actually March 31st. So they have that quota and they use it all the way up until March 31st, and then it resets, and then they can start with nominations. So sometimes they do fill up, and then they'll close programs or they'll stop processing. And it just depends on the province. And so, if they've reached the max, doesn't mean that they're just going to stop issuing, notifications of interest or accepting applications, but they can't issue more nominations than they've been allotted. But with that being said, sometimes there's a little bit of horse trading between, the federal government and the provincial governments. And if some provinces are not using all of them, sometimes the federal government will reallocate to other provinces, or the federal government will say, hey, we've got some extra ones that we're going to divvy out to you to add to your quota. So it's not always locked in at, say, 6,250 or 6,500, whatever it is. There's always a little bit of movement, and often there's a few others that they can squeeze in after the fact. So,
and I'll add to that too. Sometimes people don't actually properly accept their nominations, and then that never actually gets filled, and then maybe they have a couple like that too. So,
and then Samit, I'm also going to pull this one up, but I'm going to ring our little triangle. Anything specific about how do I qualify? Am I eligible? You really need to slide over to our firm website. The link is in the below, and come over here and book a consultation with Alicia, and she can help you to manage the actual review carefully of your situation to see what options are actually available. Now, anything destined to Quebec, Alicia and I tend to refer those to our colleagues that we know and we trust in Quebec. But sometimes you think, okay, Quebec is where I might want to go. But the reality is there are other options that might be just as, effective or available to you in other provinces as well. All right, let's see here. Yeah, here's another one, Mohammed. Another processing one. September 11th, 2020, AOR February 15th, biometrics done May. He's a Saskatchewan Immigrant Nominee Program, waiting for the MR. Any idea when we'll get MR as Outlander? Alicia, do you know what MR stands for? I don't. What is he? Do you know?
I'm trying to figure out what the MR would be as well.
I'm not sure what that is, Mohammed. There's all kinds of acronyms. Maybe it's something identified specifically with the Saskatchewan program. But as far as processing times go, everything is slow as molasses, Mohammed. It is not moving forward. And if you've got your biometrics, which is really the last step that you need to do before they start to meaningfully work on your application, if it was just May, you got a long time. Now we can go we can look at we can look at processing times, but yeah, go ahead, Alicia.
He might mean his medical request letter. That might be what he means.
Maybe medical. Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, it's tough to know. They usually, when it comes to medicals, depending on which program you're in, you're not going to see that till they kind of get into the stage of what we used to call approval in principle, where all the eligibility and everything with respect to your program you're applying for, you've met it. And then sometimes then they will trigger a medical request as a part of the background process that IRCC does. So yeah, I don't know if there's much more we can add to that one. Okay, let's see here. Okay, Babu says, can you talk about the self-employed immigration category? How long does it take to get PR for self-employed category? Okay, well, this is easy. You can talk about that, Alicia, yourself, and I'll move over here and I'll pull it up. Let's just take a look, right?
I think it's about 5 to 6 years now.
Yeah, it's insane. It is just absolutely crazy. So if we go here,
maybe they're saying 2 to 3, but
well, let's see. There's supposedly lots of updates, right? November 23rd was when the last one was updated. So let's just pull this down a bit here. And then economic class, self-employed persons. All right, here we go. Are you ready? Boom. Well, hello. There we go. That took a while. 36 is what they're saying, but I think we all kind of believe it's longer than that. So this was last updated November 23rd, but remember, with all of these processing times, you guys, we can go up to the top and see right here, due to the impacts of COVID, we can't process applications normally. Oh no, you can't. Or give accurate processing times for most applications even. So always take that with a grain of salt. All right, let's see here. Raj says passport's going to expire in October of 2022, next year. If I won't get passport request till expiry, will it be a problem?
And this is interesting. I had this issue come up on a couple, and it's a spousal application. And yeah, his passport was expiring, and immigration all of a sudden, so spousals weren't moving very quickly, and then all of a sudden immigration said, great, we're done, we've processed your application, send us your passport. But they specifically said on that letter, your passport has to be valid for 12 months, and his was only valid for 10 months. So he had already sent his off to get extended, and of course he asked for an extension on the time and was able to get that. That was no problem. He got his passport back, he submitted it, they got their final approval letter, so that's all good. But yeah, it's a little bit of a timing game now to try to figure out, okay, well, when do you submit that application so that you can get that passport back? But do know that if you get that letter from immigration that says, we're ready to finalize, and you can show that you've already submitted your passport, you've got the tracking, and you can tell them, please give me X number of days, then you should be able to do that.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump to a few more. So Eileen says, TR to PR, what will happen if I uploaded my Bachelor of Science degree, but not my transcript for proof of education? She applied under the International Grad Stream. What do you think about that one, Alicia?
So, and I mean, we've kind of yet to see how this all falls out, right? It's the TR to PR stream is different than the express entry. It's different than the other categories where they have kind of ministerial instructions or they've got really rigid parameters. So technically it's under the humanitarian and compassionate, it's under section 25, but they do have those program guidelines that they wanted people to make sure that they followed. And so if you didn't follow what they said at the time that you submitted your application, keep in mind that those program guidelines changed, right? So depending if you submitted on May 6th or maybe it was a few days later, they actually did change their program guidelines. So um, try to go back and see what they said at the time that you submitted that application. But hopefully if you did submit the copy of your degree, I don't know if you submitted other proof of when you finalized that application, it was a Canadian institution, you qualified for the program, but it's tough to say what they will do with it.
Exactly. I'm gonna pull this one up here. So Chaitanya, he says, CIC News friends have a new article. Might want to have a quick look at it, published 1 hour ago. So I think what he's talking about is something that we've been talking about nonstop. Essentially the fact that because of the massive push of applications that all came in all at once, both through the Draw 176 as well as the TR to PR pathway, the system was never designed to take in so many applications all at once. So it created massive backlogs. And remember, that was just in the context of PR. They thought, hey, we're not doing visitor visas, so we can assign the visitor visa officers to processing the TR to PR pathway. But when you do not have R10 and you have to follow up with people, it takes a long time to process those applications versus just kicking them back like they do with Express Entry if anything's wrong. So Chaitanya, I appreciate you pushing that out there, and I'll give them a shout out. I don't have a problem giving them a shout out because CIC News, Kareem, who I know, who used to work with the Conference Board of Canada, he's a good dude, and the best decision they ever made was to hire him. This article that they've just produced here, I'll give them a shout out. It's really good. They've been producing some really good news articles, and he just talks about in detail what we pretty much have already been talking about on our websites about, I love the secret memo the secret memo concept that, hey, we've got this internal briefing memo that's been revealed. It sounds really mysterious and exciting, and that's totally cool. Like totally cool. We get Lex Space from Richard Kurland, who gets all kinds of crazy internal guidelines, and maybe we should start bringing Richard on to talk about the latest kind of craziness. Like my personal favorite, Alicia, and thanks to CIC News. So you guys, go head over there and take a look. I'll give them a little shout out there. But I remember the last one that I looked at, I don't know if I shared it with you guys, was basically officers it was an internal email chain between two officers in the Ontario region who basically were complaining that every decision they refused, the lawyers that were judicially reviewing them, they were always getting sent back because DOJ was consenting to them. And they were lamenting about these darn immigration lawyers who kept appealing their decisions. That's us, you guys. So anyways, yeah. But as far as the processing, we know it's to be completely expected. And the reason that they're not doing anything now is because they're overwhelmed. They only have so many PR skilled officers to adjudicate these applications, and they're completely consumed with this massive TR to PR. And the queue with the 176 still delayed, even though most of those people I think are probably just about through the system. It set everything back. So that's thanks for that, Chaitanya, for pointing that out. And the reality is this is the world that we're in. I've said over the last month probably that it really is looking like the new year before we see open, no program specified draws, and even CEC because they've got so much in the quota. But go check it out. Haven't read the specific article to see if there's any real neat things in there. Okay, Darshan says, how much is the minimum wage a person should be getting as a manager or supervisor of a restaurant in the GTA to file CEC? So Alicia, can you touch on, I'll pull it up just for fun. Why not? We'll pull it up, the actual data, and people can see it. And I know we're kind of into overtime here, but maybe you can just touch on the impact potentially of wages on CEC, because I've never myself, other than genuineness of the job. Maybe you can touch on that and I'll pull up the actual wage.
Yeah. And so, it does depend on whether you actually have a genuineness issue, right? So if you have arranged employment and you're trying to claim those extra arranged employment points and, somebody's paying you $15 and generally supervisors are supposed to be getting 23, I could see possibly an officer being concerned that maybe you're not doing supervisory duties. But generally for the CEC, you don't have to meet a certain wage threshold at all as long as you are getting paid. So the regulations and the ministerial instructions say that you have to be getting paid a wage or commission. And so somehow you've got to be getting paid. You can't be having like situations where you've got things in lieu. But they don't specifically list a wage rate unless you're trying to claim a higher knock level. And for some reason, the officer doesn't actually believe that you are in the higher knock.
Yeah, that's really it. So unlike the labor market impact assessment process, where unless you are actually this middle column here, so if we look at the Toronto region, 1923 is what the prevailing wage rate would be if that employer was going to hire you to work as a restaurant manager in the Toronto region on an LMIA-based work permit. But when you look here, you're definitely not going to want to be below this 1435. And so, which is unbelievably low, hey, Alicia? So unbelievably. So 1435 as a restaurant manager in Toronto. And I'm curious, let's just go see what it is for our province. Oh, I got to go in the other direction here. I guess they just don't like Alberta and BC, so they push us back to the bottom. So yeah, so it looks like it's actually fairly similar. Down where I live, it's 16. Where you are, Alicia, it's $17 is the starting. But wow, they sure don't pay them much. I sure hope the tips compensate. And so where we've come here is to the job bank, and there's a career planning, and then there's a trend analysis, and it's the trend analysis section here, and then wages, where you can click on here, and then you can just search for the occupation that you want. So obviously I just typed in restaurant manager, and when you do that, it pulls it up here. You select it and then search, and then it takes you to the information that's all broken down by region. And remember, if it's, I would never for CEC would ever want to see someone earning less than this. I think if you were, obviously this is pretty much tied to a large extent to the minimum wage in that province. But if the wage, because you can't be paid lower than the minimum wage in the province. And you can see across Canada, this is the average, right? So it ranges from 15 to 39.42, but the median is for LMIA based work permits. And then I would not want to go below that low, at least for me. Now it's possible the person could, maybe this low range is above the minimum wage, but still I would expect that you're probably going to be in that range. Otherwise, as Alicia indicated, an officer will just question. They'll say, well, is this person really working in that kind of a job? It looks like maybe they're in a lower level position that's more commensurate with their wage. All right. Wow, we tackled that one. That was a good one. Okay, we've got the last one I think we maybe will finish off with here. I think we've got it, is Sumit. And he says, applied under the TR to PR essential worker. I have 12 months of full-time experience. If I count my hours, they are more than 1,560. But if I consider 30 hours per week, they are not enough.
Maybe he's got more than 30 hours per week in certain weeks, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if that is averaged. So probably, Sumit, this is where within our programs, Express Entry in particular, we have this issue with people who are applying under CEC. And the calculation of hours can be fairly complex. We would need to look more detailed, Sumit, and I strongly encourage you to head over to our website right over here and book a consultation with Alicia, and she can go through and she can take a look at what your hours and everything are really, what they really look like, because we break it down. And yes, when it comes to full-time work experience, we can only count up to 30 hours, not more. And so when you start to drop some of those hours off in a week that are maybe 40 or 50, if you had a crazy week and then you only had 10 in another week, it can complicate things. Also over a 1 year period. So you've got 12 months here of full-time experience, which is great. When you say full-time, then the question becomes, well, usually most full-time positions are above 30 hours. So we need a little bit more information from you, Sumit, but yeah, just head over and talk to Alicia, because it's hard for us to say. There's that question of averaging, right, Alicia? And they do indicate for part-time that you can, to some extent, average, but it becomes a little bit more complicated when you're trying to do that for the purposes of claiming full-time work experience. I don't know if you have anything to add, Alicia.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just hard because especially if you're doing a healthcare job and you're an essential worker, because most of those people are working on shifts and they've got to cover extra shifts. And then, they have certain requirements where they have to have a number of hours between their shifts to have a rest period. So it can get super complicated.
You bet. All right, we'll slide one last one in, Jamie. On a postgrad, applying for a study permit to do the master's. Will work during my Master's of Science count towards skilled experience? Can I pause my studies to work if not? Okay, first thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to flip back here. I'm going to go to our YouTube channel, and I'm going to highlight this one that we just released, Alicia and I, right here. This is all about express entry and Canadian work experience. So definitely head over there, watch that video. Remember, it's a long one. Yes, it's like an hour, and we spend a lot of time with that Q&A, but the beginning stages of that video, actually, no, that one's not too bad. That was only 34 minutes. But this will cover a lot of the ins and outs and answer many of the questions, excuse me, that you have regarding this. But Alicia, do you want to tackle this one?
Yeah, I also wrote a blog article on this. And so if you go to our website and you go to our resources.
Okay, let's go back here and see if I can find the right screen here. Back here, and then we go to our resources right here and blog.
Yeah. And then we just released this one. So we did the video on Tuesday and we got the article up as well. And so this one, it's going to talk about exactly what you're asking in a general sense. So what happens if you are doing your master's and you want to be working? And so under the regulations, you've got a few sections where you are able to work part-time when you're a full-time student. But the second that you stop your studies, the second that you take a leave of absence, or you're no longer a full-time student, you're not authorized to work at all.
Yeah. And same thing goes, Jamie, with all of the other individuals. This is a very, very complex area, and we definitely don't want to, give the impression that there's one canned answer for every situation. So we recommend you reach out and connect with us and just see, see if there's something else maybe that we're missing because we don't have all the information. And then I'll just jump to the last question here. Jennifer says, just to clarify, can we count our working hours while waiting for the postgrad work permit decision?
So I've got two articles on that, Jennifer. I've got that article that Mark just showed, that blog article. And then there's another article that I had posted as well on the blog. And this was specifically right before the TR to PR. So this was back in April. I had done another article and it's right there on the right. Yeah. Can students be working after the end of studies in Canada? And this goes in detail to what the various scenarios are. And so it really depends on the date that you get your notification of completion from your school, the earliest date that you get that, because once you get that, you have to stop working until you submit your PGWP. And then as long as it was a complete application and you abided by the terms of your study permit and your study permit was still valid at the time that you applied and everything else under the regulation, then 186 sub W allows people in general to begin full-time work after they've submitted that PGWP.
Absolutely. So there's our music. You guys can hear it. I didn't do it. It just started playing magically. All right. This is a great Q&A. Alicia, thank you so much for joining us. And all of these people who are so used to looking at my ugly face here every day, it's nice to have a change and to have your insight and all of the amazing help that you give to the people that are just trying to navigate their way through this crazy world that we call immigration. Thanks so much, Alicia.
Thank you, Mark.
All right. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week. Wednesday for me, Thursday for Alicia. Same time.